In the last lecture, we encountered the so-called CORS error. CORS stands for Cross-Origin Resource Sharing. And that's exactly what we're doing. We have a separated server and client. Remember, they're running on different domains. Localhost 3000 for the server, localhost 4200 for our Angular app. Now, client and server want to talk to each other, and they're not on the same host. If they were, then we could communicate without any issues. But if they're on different hosts, like in our case, we got 4200, but it doesn't matter if we have different hosts, well, then communicating with such background requests will fail. And that's a security mechanism. You should not be able to access the data on a server or its resources in general if you're not running on the same server. So if the request is coming from a different address, this will give us a so-called CORS error. The problem just is, for our setup and for many modern web apps, we want to allow this. It's not a security issue here, it's a wanted behavior. We want to expose our server API to all possible clients, and naturally, they will not run on our server. So we need to disable this default mechanism, and this is done by setting the right headers on the server-side response. Now, which headers are these? Back in our code, it has to be done in the server-side code, as I mentioned. So let's go there to the app.js file. And there I will simply add one additional middleware. Now, this middleware, of course, has to run before we handle the response sending here, because thereafter the response is already sent, we can't manipulate it anymore. And we want to manipulate the response because we need to add headers to it. So app use, no filters added, so no path filters added, because I want to do this for all incoming requests. And then I get my default function as an argument here, which gets the request, the response, and this next function it can call. And in there, the goal is to call next at the end, because the request should be able to continue to the next middleware. But before we do that, I want to manipulate the request, or the response to be precise. So we'll take the response object and set a header with the setHeader method. Now, the setHeader method is very simple. The first argument is the header key, the identifier, and the second one is the value for that header. So I want to set a header which is called access-control-allow-origin. And make sure to not mistype here, because this is a clearly defined header understood by the browser. The value I want to set it to is a star. This means no matter which domain the app which is sending the request is running on, it's allowed to access our resources. This is one important header. It's not the only one though. We also need to set another header related to this. It's the access control allow headers header. Well, the first one allows which domains are able to access our resources, but now we can also restrict this to domains sending requests with a certain set of headers besides the default headers. There are default headers like the browser and so on, but we also want to allow some extra headers. We want to allow the origin header, and that simply is a comma separated list here, the X requested with header, the content type header, and the accept header. You can add more, you can also remove some of them. We don't use them all in this app, but this essentially means the incoming request may have these extra headers. It doesn't have to have them, but it may have them, and it will still be allowed. If it has another non-default header, which is not defined here, access would be blocked, even though we do generally allow it for all domains, but this is an additional criterion. Now there's one other header I will set with setHeader, and that is the access control allow methods header. And here we control which HTTP verbs may be used to send requests. And I want to allow get, post, and as you can see, this is again a comma separated list, patch, delete, and important, options. This is an implicit request sent by the browser by default prior to post requests, for example, to check whether the post request is valid. So even if you never directly send such an options request from within your Angular app, it will implicitly be sent, and therefore you should allow it as a HTTP verb. Now you can also allow put, for example, if your app needs that. If you don't plan on using it, don't add it. So this is now our setup, and with these headers, we should now be able to send that request. So if we save that, it should restart the server automatically. We can go back to our Angular app and simply reload the page. And now we see our 2 posts here, and we got no error. These are the posts coming from the server, and this is how we connect our Angular app to our Node Express server in the most basic form. Now that's cool and all. Now let's also make sure we can post new posts to the server.